back by popular demand, I'm doing another recommendations video, but this time of 2021 releases. And I'm not going for the most indie films in the world. You've more than likely heard of these, and you've more than likely seen a few of them. Having said that, I'm not going for like the biggest releases. I'm also going for the UK release dates. So it's like you have brilliant films like Judas and the Black Messiah, but obviously that's distributed by Warner Bros and whatnot, so that's not like the smallest film in the world. And everyone already knows how brilliant that one is. It's more so if you've got one on your watch list, this is hopefully the final push in recommending, these are damn good films. Also, I'll be discussing the films in a completely arbitrary order. I'm just going from most stressful to least stressful. So with all that in mind, let's talk about the first film. Spider-Man No Way Home is So the first film is Ben Wheatley's In the Earth, which is an incredibly interesting film, which is very, very reminiscent of his earlier stuff. It feels like it could have very much come out back then. It is one that I wish I could just take a random group of strangers, show them this film, and then sit them around a table and talk about it with them afterwards. It's not for everyone. I know last week I just spent a whole video discussing how you can't watch a film incorrectly, and I came to the conclusion if you watch a film, how you feel is best and what you get the most enjoyment out of. Having said that, don't listen to me, I'm an idiot. With this film, I really recommend leaving your phone in the other room, having the lights off, completely just almost letting the film wash over you, just being completely immersed in it, because it can get really intense. I should have maybe said straight up that this is a very intense horror film. It's a very slow piece, and that's really one of the things that I loved about it, because you get a lot of slow horror that can sometimes work, sometimes not. It kind of all depends on typically the ending with how it builds up and pays off, but this one, for me at least, paid off in spades. Like as soon as I'd finished it, I came out of the theatre and I was like, how do I make an audience feel that? And then went off with a mate and like wrote a script like the next week. It's an incredibly interesting, very thought-provoking film with some incredible performances. Surprise, Reece Shearsmith pops up. Joel Fry is excellent as ever, and Alora Torkia is insanely good. Like, Jesus Christ, I am in love. This is a film where I at least went in completely blind. I knew some of the actors in it, I knew the director, I loved his previous work, and I think it really benefits from that. I really recommend not watching any trailers, definitely for the people who are already into horror films. If horror isn't really your thing, then it pains me to say, but I really cannot recommend it. But Ben Wheatley, my man, you've outdone yourself. And so moving on to the next film, it's another very stressful piece, but not horror at all. It's Boiling Point, which is an incredibly interesting film. Set in a restaurant, you kind of follow the main character of a chef. Having worked in a restaurant for a few years, this is a documentary. Stephen Graham, as in everything, is excellent, always, all of the time. I don't think I've ever seen a bad performance from him, and he seems like a really nice guy. Something that I think it balances really well are like the smaller, softer, tender character moments on top of the broad narrative, and like just how everything's going on all at once in this restaurant, and how it really has time for like these smaller moments that can then build up into larger things, or like how you kind of hear something as you walk past some characters on a table and you kind of eavesdrop, and then later it becomes a thing in itself, and then how it can be some subtler things, some like really beautiful tender moments between characters on top of some fucking stressful nightmare scenarios. And I feel like with the ending, it potentially does fall over into the melodramatic. Not necessarily at its disservice. It's a very interesting piece still all the same, but I feel like it takes it out of this is happening at so many places in the country. This is kind of a slice of life almost, as things just get progressively worse and worse for these characters. But it is also an incredible feat of filmmaking. A lot of films have tried the long take and the one shot, and some very successfully, even if they do kind of use some digital trickery to get there. But this is the whole 90 minutes just in one take. And at first it kind of, especially as a filmmaker, I was getting very anxious, like, oh God, cut, like something could easily go so wrong. But it really helps immerse you in it, because you're going in through the building, then out through the back towards the bins, then back out, you're speaking, you're there with the customers, and then you're then back in the kitchen. And it really kind of feels like you're gliding through, getting this glance at all these different people's lives. I really recommend it. It was such an immersive experience, where it's one of those films where you're not even sat back going like, oh yeah, I'm really enjoying this. You're completely lost in the story. And the fact that they managed to have all these moving parts, it's not even like it was like locked off camera, like, okay, we're going to do this for an hour and a half. It was so ambitious and so inspiring in so many ways. It's really solid film. And honestly, I feel like Vinette Robinson was probably the biggest standout in it for me, because I've seen her in other things and she's absolutely brilliant, but here you can really feel the character. Like, it felt like, oh yeah, I've met that character. And that's definitely the case with Stephen Graham as well, and all the other brilliant like actors and performers in it. There wasn't a weak link for me where I was like, okay, they're kind of like, even all the small supporting roles. I don't know if any of the customers were non-actors, or if like everyone in there were like professionally trained actors, but there really was not a weak link. It just feels like these are real tangible people, and almost like the whole film could just be CCTV cameras around the restaurant. And obviously it wouldn't be as immersive, but it feels like it would play out just as well. Because the blocking, if there are any directors or like aspiring directors, I really recommend watching this film for the blocking alone and the camera work on how they frame different things, because this is insanely well directed. Philip Barantini, my hat off to you, good sir. And then keeping it in line with the very tense kind of atmosphere, but with some really tender, beautiful moments. Shiva Baby is a film that isn't very long. It's an incredibly quick watch, but you feel like you have aged decades by the time the credits roll, because it's just the worst possible thing happening after the worst possible thing happening, while also being an incredibly hilarious, tender, heartwarming film. The whole cast here are incredible, and Rachel Sennett is just absolutely remarkable. The way that, obviously with acting, there's not only the things that you have to say in the dialogue, but it's also in reacting to what the other person's saying. I feel like Rachel Sennett really nailed that. There's a few scenes in particular where the main conversation that most other films would be like the main focus, that's where like the camera would be looking, and while it's framed as such, the focus is still on Rachel Sennett's character, and so you are just kind of really feeling every single reaction to what's being said. Hopefully from this you will kind of feel how inherently comedic and stressful this whole situation is. So a college student attends a family shiva where she is accosted by her relatives, outshined by her ex-girlfriend, and face to face with her sugar daddy and his family. It's one hell of a ride that I am desperate to rewatch. The way that this film balances comedy and tension is second to none. It's one that I feel like a lot of people would really enjoy.
Do you kids know each other?
Yeah.
And then the next film is Pig, starring Nicolas Cage, which is such an incredible piece, because with the premise, you almost feel like, okay, this is a revenge film starring Nicolas Cage, looking at his previous work.
Open up my eyes! My eyes! You're in my shirt! You're in my shirt!
I imagine this is going to be like John Wick on steroids. And instead of that, it kind of uses those expectations, because it kind of has a few scenes towards the start when they first go on this revenge quest. And it kind of thinks, oh, if this is happening at the start, what's going to happen at the end? But what actually happens is you just fall in love with these characters, and it's this whole almost surreal underbelly of this culinary world in America that, like, I hate the whole sequelization of everything. I hate that everything now then goes off into a cinematic universe. But this is a world that I need to see explored in hundreds of films. I could never get, even if they did like a fake documentary where it was just like a master chef in this world. I need to know what Gordon Ramsay thinks of these restaurants. And so the plot of it is that it's Nicolas Cage out living in the woods with his pig, who is the best girl. And she's brilliant at finding truffles. And so it's then after she's pignapped, and Nicolas Cage is beaten up a bit, where then he goes with our Lord and Saviour
Payment!
to then go and find and get the pig back. I think this is the most tense I have been while watching people eat in films since Phantom Thread. Not for the same reasons. And so it's this incredibly almost chill, meditative film. The atmosphere that it creates, it was just this really warm, loving feeling in the cinema. This is a film that I will be revisiting for years. And I know that slow television and slow cinema is currently like very big, especially online at the minute. Like, you know, when you have a camera on the side of a train for a few hours and it's just going through the countryside, and it's just something to have on. And I just really hope that one day the filmmakers behind Pig release a slow cinema version, like a slow TV version. It just 10 straight hours of Nicolas Cage exploring the woods looking for truffles with his pig, because that would be a really beautiful thing to bestow upon the world. And that is my direct call out to Michael Sarnowski. You're sitting on a gold mine, going from Nicolas Cage with a pig happy in the woods. Now I recommend Joaquin Phoenix reconnecting with his nephew in the most beautiful way possible. Come On, Come On is a film that I hope becomes state-mandated essential viewing for everyone, where it's law, you have to see this film. This is a film that I don't feel comes along very often. Mike Mills is an incredibly talented filmmaker, and I've loved all of his stuff that I've seen. But if in the way you take Richard Ayoade's Submarine film, for example, it's a brilliant, funny film, but if you go into a dictionary and you look up quirky British comedy, the Blu-ray for Submarine falls out. But this is a film where if you put all the heartwarming joy and passion and love for humanity and life and people and your family into a tight press and then printed it off, the Blu-ray for Come On, Come On would come out. And disclaimer, this is the happiest sad film you will ever see. Because not only is it about Joaquin Phoenix's character reconnecting with his nephew, but also he has this radio show where he goes around and interviews children and asks them the big, deep, existential questions about life. And their responses are equal part hilarious as well as extremely profound in places and gut-wrenching in others. Quite often with films, if they have a big-name actor in it, I see that character that they're portraying with like the face of that famous person. There's always the name above them. That's not anything on the actors. And that's just because it's someone you recognise. Say if one of your mates or family members is an actor, then if you watch them in a film, you're going to have a different experience than if it was a complete unknown to you. And while I'm not saying that I'm mates with any big name actors, I really cannot commend Joaquin Phoenix here enough, because that was completely lost on me. Like in the first few minutes, I was like, okay, that's Joaquin Phoenix. And then after that, I was just so lost in this really naturalistic piece. My man, Woody Norman. Jesus Christ, I wish I was that talented now, let alone as a kid. And if you are someone who is going through a tough time at the minute, I really recommend this film, because not only of its endless joy and optimism and love, but I feel like it could really help people who are in a bad place. This is one that you just cannot help but love and fall in love with, of the characters, of the place, of the story. Mike Mills, again, thank you. And so yeah, they are 5 films that I really loved and enjoyed from last year. But yeah, I feel like fiction really helped a lot of people last year, given the world. I hope that you've heard about a film that you maybe didn't have before, or even if it's just been the final push to maybe check out a film that's been on your watch list for a while. Yeah, thank you for watching.